Hey everyone, and welcome to the India Story, the show that tracks all the major developments out of India for a global audience. And this week, the India Story was really shining, especially at the Oscars, where the global phenomenon known as RRR won an Oscar, of course, but it was a double delight for India, as we also had the Elephant Whisperers winning an Oscar. So a big week for India when it comes to the Oscars, and the soft power of India and the India Story shining at the Academy Awards. But that's not the only big story that we're going to be tracking for you. Also a big week when it comes to what's happening in the semiconductor space. Now remember, the race for semiconductors, where are the semiconductor factories going to be, where are the design labs going to be, where are the fabs going to be set up, where are the packaging and assemblies for semiconductors going to be running, is going to be a very major aspect of the entire war for dominance in global electronics. And India is really putting its best foot forward right now. A new semiconductor policy was announced a short while back, and now India and the United States are sitting and having a conversation and saying, how can we work together? I'm going to have on this show one of the people who's been driving that entire thrust, Ajay Chaudhary, founder and CEO of HCL, but also he's an advisor on the India semiconductor mission. So he's going to be talking to us about how the entire drive for semiconductors is going to be going. Tarun Pathak is going to be speaking to us, somebody who's been analyzing this in great detail. And then, of course, as I told you, we are going to be taking a look at the Oscars. All of that coming up for you on the India Story. But first, a quick look at the major headlines that you should be tracking.
Will Vladimir Putin attend the G20 summit in September? A Kremlin spokesperson says the possibility cannot be ruled out, inviting speculation that the New Delhi summit could see Putin's first appearance outside of Russia since the invasion of Ukraine. After the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank in the US, Union Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar meets startup leaders and industry experts, assures them that the government is laser focused on helping them tide over the crisis. US recognizes Arunachal Pradesh as an integral part of India, condemns China's military aggression in trying to change the status quo along the line of actual control in a bipartisan Senate resolution.
And let's turn our attention now to semiconductors. Look, a lot of the semiconductors in the world have been coming from Taiwan. It's been one of the major countries which has been running semiconductors, and then there are others. The US is a contender, South Korea is a contender, other such countries are there. India has often spoken about it, that let's become a player in semiconductors. Maybe we should set up a fab. Maybe we should look at design, which is a place, after all, where we do have a certain amount of talent. Maybe we can do packaging, the various aspects of the entire semiconductor supply chain. But it's never really worked. This time, though, could be different. Why are people saying that this time it could be different? Because the government of India has just come out with an entire scheme a short while back where they are saying, we will pay 50% pari passu every rupee that you invest in semiconductor fabs in India. We'll pay 50% from the government. And by the way, state governments also chip in with another 25%. And then there is interest. And now people are looking at India. Gina Raimondo from the United States was here 4 days, spent some time with Piyush Goyal, signed an agreement looking at how India and the US can cooperate in this space. So can India become a big player in semiconductors? Well, here's a special package that we put together for you.
In perhaps one of the most important developments for India's diplomacy and manufacturing capability, India and the United States signed a memorandum of understanding last week to boost coordination for the manufacturing of semiconductors or chipsets. Now, why is this deal important? Well, to understand that, let's understand why semiconductors are important and why they are currently posing a major crisis for global powers. At the heart of all modern technological devices, a TV, a phone, or a computer, is a semiconductor or a microchip. In fact, it's not even just computers. In the modern world, your car, your washing machine, your AC, all rely on and need semiconductors to function. And the process of manufacturing these chips that power everything around us is increasingly complex and is leading to tension between the United States and China. That India can perhaps take advantage of. It takes a lot of moving parts to make one of these modern engineering marvels. Only 3 American companies make software needed to design advanced chips. Making physical chips using those designs requires a machine that's only made by one company in the Netherlands. And only companies based in Taiwan and South Korea can put all of this together and manufacture the most advanced computer chips. These are the choke points in the global supply chain. Now, a few years back, China was quick to recognize this. After the Cold War ended in the 1990s, China had become friendlier with the United States and had enticed many chip companies to shift their assembly operations to China. In the 2000s, China dominated the assembly part of the supply chain, but as China's political scenario changed, the regime realized that this assembly relied on imported silicon from their geopolitical adversaries, and poured money into upping their own capabilities, which some allege included IP theft. This angered the United States, which saw this move as a security threat. And the US-China tech Cold War has been heating up lately. In 2018, the Trump administration banned US companies from selling components with Chinese tech company ZTE. In 2019, it banned them from doing business with China's largest tech company, Huawei. Then, in 2022, Joe Biden's administration targeted China's chip industry more broadly. It banned global tech companies to use U.S. semiconductor technology from selling chips to China. In the midst of this dispute, the U.S. is actively engaging the practice of friend-shoring, which means sourcing raw materials and components from countries who are your allies. And India is looking to become a semiconductor manufacturing nation. Because remember, the vast majority of microchips these days are made in Taiwan, which is fast heating up as a potential site of conflict between the US and China. Setting up semiconductor manufacturing facilities requires years of labor and billions in investment. But with India's access to talent and continued investment, it could well be on its way.
Well, you know, if you really want to understand semiconductors, who better to talk to than the man who's been described as the father of Indian hardware, Ajay Chaudhary, the founder and former CEO of HCL. You're also an advisor, of course, in the Indian semiconductor mission.
That's right.
And you've been trying to work out a semiconductor policy for what, how long is it?
Maybe 30 odd years.
30 years you've been saying India should have semiconductors.
Yes.
And finally it's looking as if it could be possible.
Yes, that's right.
Do you think it's possible this time?
It will definitely happen. It will definitely happen.
Why? Why do you say that?
You see, actually, this time I think the seriousness with which the government has taken up this project is phenomenal. And the benefit that we have this time is that we have 2 ministers who are very, very tech savvy. Yeah. And they really understand why semiconductors are required. And as a result, they have created a policy which is extremely attractive. I think it's the most attractive policy in the world. If US gives 30% of your total budget for semiconductor plant, India gives 50% and the states give another 20%.
So if you're setting up a semiconductor plant or you're setting up a fab in India, central government pays 50% of it, and if you're setting it up wherever UP or Gujarat, they'll give another 20-25%.
That's correct.
So you only have to, and these are expensive plants.
Very expensive.
But the government is paying 70%,
That's right.
75%.
That's right. That's right.
And also the enabling environment, is that now fairly clear and fairly clear-cut as to what...
It's going to take time. Yeah. But the good news is that the type of advisors that the government this time has on ISM are global Indians.
Right.
So they have really taken advantage of all the capability of the diaspora. And as a result, they're getting extremely good advice on how to do, what to do, when to do, etc., etc. And we are no longer looking at the proposals on a paper situation. This time the proposals, they've gone down very deep to understand the technology, the kind of people, will they be able to... See, if they're going to spend 70%, then the business plan has to be very, very good and successful.
And the person has to be good, right?
Yes.
So you're betting on somebody who can't be a fly-by-night operator.
No, not at all.
Has to be somebody who has to have the ability to scale it in the rest of it.
Correct.
Just to understand, and since we do have you with us, there are three different aspects of semiconductor business from what I've understood, right? There's design, part A. Part B is the fab of the wafer, and that's where a lot of money comes in. And the third is then is the sort of assembly and the packaging and assembly and that sort of a thing. In the first has got relatively smaller investments. We've got a fair amount of talent pool. The second one is where the big investments are required, the fab.
Correct.
That's where the billions of dollars come in.
Correct.
Where do you think we'll be able to set it up? All three or just in the third part?
Look, we have to be there in all three.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, all four. One piece is missing as yet, which is being put together now. Which is the R&D. So you see, the first part
That's
is
not part of the design.
No. That's totally different. The R&D is meant for the plant.
Yeah.
So you need to create processes for what you're going to do in the plant, for which you need R&D. Okay. So the first piece is designing a chip, where we are very good at. I mean, we have great capability. But all the people today are designing for the world. They don't design for India. So I think now that has to change. So the government has come out with a design-linked incentive scheme, which is enabling people to set up design centers here. And our objective is to get at least 100 startups to create design centers here.
So the design, we would not be... India's always had talent. India's doing a lot of it abroad, and you would expect that. I guess even part of the understanding with the US is about tapping into Indian talent. The new
I
MOU
guess
that
so,
has been
but
signed.
there's no details available of that MOU.
Yeah. So the design part I get, but the fab, 5 billion, 10 billion, stable... I guess power problems like water and power and roads are not a problem in India anymore. Luckily,
not
that's been sorted out.
Sorted out.
But that sort of investment, right? So I know there are three proposals.
See, after all, the risk that the government has to take is a 70% risk. And that's why it's taking longer to decide. Okay? But what we see is that there are good proposals available. At least one or two proposals are good. And more will come up. Because everybody is now getting very interested in India. Because suddenly when this announcement of Foxconn coming and investing into India has happened, everybody's woken up all over the world. That Apple is moving its plants here, all of that is happening.
And you need to do it because Taiwan and China, there's geopolitical problems. Is China going to invade Taiwan? What happens to chip supplies all over the world? So there's that.
Everybody's worried about it. So they want a good, stable supply of chips from a country. And that's why India becomes very favorable for that.
I've been talking to you about this book you just launched, written a fantastic book, Just Aspire. You talked about how these cycles have been done in the past. And you also mentioned in that a lot of these revolutions would have been considered by India nahi kar sakti hai. India can't be in hardware.
That's right.
India can't produce PCs.
That's right.
India can't produce mobile phones or get into the mobile phone space. India can't do X, Y, Z. India is a software country.
Yeah.
That has changed?
That has changed dramatically. I remember meeting somebody in the government about 17 years ago. And I went to his home. And I said, we represent hardware and this is what we want to do. He says, why should we waste time on hardware? We are doing so well in software, let's continue. The reality is that if you're not in hardware, you're really missing out. Yeah. Because software and hardware are two sides of the same coin. And if you don't do hardware, you actually miss out a very large market, which is available to India. And today the benefit is that hardware is no longer just hardware. It's huge amount of software integrated into hardware. So as a country, we have a benefit that we can put together software and hardware together and create a solution.
India software kar sakti hai, India services kar sakti hai, India will not be able to do hardware. As I said, you've been called the father of Indian hardware.
Yes, that's right.
You've heard that how many times?
And many times. But I think
believe that it can be done.
Situation has changed today. If you start looking at what's happened in the last 3 to 4 years with PLI and all these things happening, we are the second largest exporter of mobile phones in the country. We are suddenly getting there in manufacturing. Now we need to take the next step of designing products in India and making India a product nation. If we don't do that, if we don't have Indian brands, who will be the customer for the semiconductors?
I mean, technically you could be manufacturing them out here and selling them to the Apples and the Samsungs.
No. The kind of chips that we are going to make in India are not going to be bought by Apples, etc. These are 28 nanometer and above chips. So these chips are actually meant for the industry like, let's say, office automation industry or automobile industry, or you look at the washing machines, etc., etc. So it's
so India's not going to necessarily try and do the high-end
No.
chips.
There is no need for us to do that.
Okay.
Because that is what we will be able to easily get from other countries. So we don't need to waste our time on that. We need to start somewhere. And therefore, we have to start from 28 nanometers and above. And the interesting part is globally also that market is still growing.
Okay. Ajay Chaudhary, thank you so much for joining us. Let's hope that that revolution, which you've seen in other industries, will come to semiconductors.
I hope so too.
Thank you so much. And congratulations for your new book.
Thank you so much.
Everyone should read it if they haven't yet done that.
Thank you so much.
So that was Ajay Chaudhary, founder of HCL, talking to me about semiconductors just a short while back. Let's now talk to some other experts as well. What can India do, and can India inject itself into global supply chains when it comes to semiconductors? Tarun Pathak now joining us from Counterpoint Research. Tarun, what's your take? Can India become a big player in semiconductors, inject itself into supply chains?
I think, yes, this is absolutely the right time. So if you look at right now, what is happening, we are in the middle of this semiconductor boom, in a sense, like we crunch numbers day in and day out. And if you look at for the next 5 or 6 years, India will consume almost $300 billion worth of semiconductor components. And that's a big number altogether. And everyone knows the value of this number because all eyes are on India. If such a big opportunity is lying only in one emerging market, which means everyone in the value chain wants to realign itself to this particular opportunity. And semiconductor is such a field where one nation can't do it all.
All right, the pact and the MOU that has just been signed with the United States, how do you think that helps, Tarun?
I think it's more like I can say it's a very initial. It won't have any tangible benefits as of now. We can point out it's more like a signal that semiconductor, like I said, it won't happen from one country or so. It's a truly globalization thing. But at the same thing, most of these companies are also looking at geopolitical risk. So they are looking at the cooperation from the countries where they think can go longer, because if we are talking about semiconductor, we are not talking about like 4 years, 5 years down the line. We are talking something which is like 1 decade, 2 decade, 3 decade down the line. And what really matter here is very valuable partnerships among the countries. So for example, India, US can look at it from a long-term perspective, because US knows that the kind of talent what India has, it can't be available other ways. And then maybe going forward, we can look into Europe as well. That might also enter into the same and seek some kind of partnership in the space. So it's more like finding out the advantage what one country has over another, and then make sure you have a partnership which is more viable and which is more long term, because all these leading companies of US, they need India more than India need anything else. So I think it's more like an hint of a partnership in the same domain, like facilitating the supply chain, technology cooperation, or maybe at one point of time you will see some kind of knowledge transfer happening as well. And while India can contribute greatly in terms of talent development also.
Tarun Pathak, thank you so much for joining us with that. So semiconductors could be an important part of the India story. Now I'll tell you something that is undoubtedly a big part of the India story. India's soft power. India's music, India's films. And it's not Bollywood only that I'm talking about, because obviously RRR, a Telugu film. And you had a Telugu film song there at the Oscars, being performed, getting a standing ovation. These absolutely rapturous scenes that we actually saw out there, getting a standing ovation. I don't think anybody has seen anything quite like Natu Natu at the Oscars. If you thought there was drama last year, well, this is interesting and this is different. And Natu Natu won, as in fact did the Elephant Whisperers. So could all of this have a lasting impact, though, on the Indian entertainment industry? Should India start thinking more and more global? Who better to talk to about that than Tarun Katyal, who's of course been running lots and lots of things in the entire Indian entertainment space for a long time before he's gone out to launch his own social media venture with Koto. Tarun, thanks for joining us. You have, of course, been part of the entire journey of Indian entertainment. Tell me, is this going to be a turning point, an inflection point for Indian entertainment?
Yeah, it's going to continue to scale. I think more and more people are going to appreciate the kind of stories we tell. I think you can see what's happening with the Israeli content or what's happening with, the Turkish content. So across the board, I think the tide is lifting, and this international collaborations between, some of these platforms like Netflix or Amazon or Disney or even Paramount or the others, and them actually investing in production bases across the world outside of just Hollywood is allowing all of this content to get then the kind of visibility, the kind of production values, the kind of investment, and people and their skills are also getting improvised on an ongoing basis.
All right, Tarun Katyal, thank you so much for joining us. And before I leave you on this episode of the India Story, let's just speak to somebody else who's really been making her mark and completely believes in how global Indian entertainment is going to be. Smriti Mudrala joining us, the person, of course, behind The Romantics. It's a Netflix series which has been running very successfully here in India, but she's speaking to us from Los Angeles. Smriti, thank you for joining us and tell us all about it. How big is India becoming in the global entertainment space?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there is a recognition, in just sort of the public, like mainstream consciousness, that a growing, consciousness that Hindi cinema and cinema from India, not just Hindi cinema, but from all over India is sort of like a mighty force, that's influential worldwide. But also I would say within the industry, within the entertainment industry, there is the broad narrative is that India is the future, the Indian audience is sort of where we've sort of hit a ceiling, in the US as far as the US audience goes. So now everyone is looking abroad and specifically to India as the opportunity for growth. And that audience has become, an Indian audience has become extremely important to anyone who's in entertainment, the entertainment business. So it kind of goes both ways. I think there's more of a recognition, from sort of mainstream audiences, about Indian cinema and the sort of fun and the artistry and the music and everything of that. But I think even sort of in a business sense, anyone in the entertainment business knows that they have to have an India strategy, and India is perhaps the most important market for the future.
Smriti Mudrala, thank you so much for joining us, and that's all we have time for this episode of the India Story. Do join us again next week.